The ceiling collapsed in an instant, but that moment seemed to last an eternity. Dust filled my lungs before I could process what was happening. I felt the weight of the beams on my back, the bitter taste of concrete in my mouth, and a deafening buzzing that drowned out all sound. My thoughts immediately raced to my wife, to the brothers who were with me, to everyone I loved. For a moment, I thought we would never see the light of day again. But before I reach that basement, I need to start from the beginning. My name is Elias Mansour. I'm 63 years old, although many say I look 80. War leaves deep scars. It ages not only the face, but also the soul. I was born in Iqaluit, a coastal city in Syria that once breathed peace and joy. The Mediterranean glistened in the sun, and the markets were always full of spices, fresh bread, and the cheerful hubbub of people. I spent my childhood selling fish with my father at the port. It was there that I met my wife, Mira. She was 17, I was 20. We married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. We had 3 children, and for years we lived like many, working, laughing, dreaming of better days. But from an early age, faith was always present in my life. My grandmother taught me to pray before bed, and although I drifted away in my youth, something inside me never stopped seeking God. It wasn't until I was 40 that I truly surrendered my life to Christ. There wasn't a grand experience, nor a religious campaign. It was on a lonely night, kneeling in my room, crying without understanding why, that I felt a peace that didn't come from within. Over time, I became more involved in the church, repairing chairs, organizing meetings, visiting the sick. I never imagined I would reach this age surrounded by war and destruction. When the conflict reached Syria, many leaders and brothers fled or disappeared. Someone had to stay. Someone had to keep the faith alive. By 2018, my city was unrecognizable. The streets were marked by distrust. Buildings bore the scars of explosions, and curfews and checkpoints turned even the brightest day into a heavy silence. People walked with their heads down, whispering to each other, as if the very air might betray them. Our congregation dwindled to fewer than 30 people. Some had escaped to Turkey or Lebanon. Others stopped coming out of fear. I didn't judge them. The fear was real given what we might face. Meeting together became a constant risk. Churches were watched and sometimes attacked. We heard stories of looted temples, missing believers, and entire families forced to choose between renouncing their faith or losing everything. So we decided to meet in secret. Our refuge was a basement beneath an old house belonging to a brother named Yusuf. It was damp in winter and scorching in summer, windowless, with only a small opening that let in a little light. We built makeshift benches out of planks and cinder blocks and hung a simple cross on the stone wall. We didn't have reliable electricity, so we lit candles. Each encounter was an act of faith and courage. We arrived one by one, spaced out so as not to arouse suspicion. We entered quickly, closed the door carefully, and descended the narrow staircase to that silent space. Surrounded by darkness and dampness, we were reminded of the God who never abandons us. And even when the world crumbled around us, there in that basement, we felt the hope that only He can give. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else understands what it means to sing hymns softly but with your heart pounding, or to pray knowing that every word can be heard by someone who hates you just for saying it. I don't know if you've ever had to choose between your security and your faith, but if you have, then you know. It's not heroism. It's simply living in accordance with what you can't abandon. Easter 2018 was approaching. For us, celebrating the resurrection amidst so much destruction held profound meaning. It was a reminder that life can emerge even from the darkest grave. We decided to take a chance and gather that night to share the Lord's Supper. Mira, my wife, looked at me with concern when I told her. "Elias, are you sure?" she asked, holding my wrinkled hands. "There's increasing military activity. I heard explosions near the port last night." "I know," I replied, "but if we fail to reunite, they'll have already won. Not just the war, but our souls." She nodded slowly. Mira always had more courage than I gave her credit for. The days leading up to Easter were tense. Rumors of attacks and bombings circulated constantly. Some brothers called, asking us to cancel the meeting, saying the risk was too great. I spent nights in prayer, seeking God's guidance. Would canceling be prudence or fear? Would gathering be courage or recklessness? The answer came not in an audible voice, nor in miraculous signs, but in a silent, deep conviction within my spirit. We had to celebrate. On Saturday night, the air was heavy, almost still, even near the sea. The sky had a strange orange hue, as if something were burning in the distance. I left the house with a small bag containing bread and a bottle of grape juice, saved for the occasion. The streets were deserted, and my footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement. In the distance, I heard the muffled roar of military vehicles. I stopped at a corner, waiting for 3 trucks carrying armed soldiers to pass, their flashlights sweeping the facades. I held my breath until they disappeared. I followed the walls, avoiding the light. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound alerted me. I learned to walk this way quickly and silently, always aware of my surroundings. I passed through streets still scarred by bombings, among smoking buildings and rubble. An abandoned child's shoe caught my eye, and I had to look away to avoid losing myself in the horror. I finally reached the basement. Jus had already opened the door and gave me a quick signal. I descended into the stifling heat. Candles cast flickering shadows on the damp walls, and gradually the others arrived. Rania with her daughter Fuad, his wife Samir, who had been limping since a bomb had exploded near their shop, and others. Their faces were tired, but filled with something fear could not erase. Quickly counting, there were 24 of us that night. 24 souls who decided it was worth risking everything. Among them was Tariq, a young man new to the congregation with restless eyes that kept glancing toward the stairs. There was also elderly Layla, who had lost her husband in a bombing months earlier, but kept coming because she said it was the only place where she still felt alive. I sat on a worn chair near the cross and observed the faces illuminated by candles. Some smiled, others kept their eyes closed, as if already immersed in prayer. In the corner, children played silently, oblivious to the danger lurking outside. We began with a whispered prayer. I asked for protection, giving thanks for every moment of courage and encouragement. Then we sang an old hymn, the one my grandmother taught me when I was a child. The voices mingled with the distant noise of the city. Engines, gunshots, the metallic echo of doors closing. For a moment, I closed my eyes and thought about how fragile everything there was. That basement, those candles, those lives. It could all disappear in a second. Yet there we were, singing, praying, believing. That night, as we broke bread and drank from the same cup, as we sang in whispers and prayed with our eyes closed, we didn't know we were minutes away from witnessing a move of God we would never forget. We had no idea the sky was about to touch the ground and that we would still be standing. The humidity clung to our skin like a second layer. The smell of the basement was intense. Melted wax, damp earth, that peculiar aroma only found in long-closed places. The candles flickered with each collective breath, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. It was like being inside a cave, isolated from the outside world, protected only by meters of concrete and the hope of going unnoticed. There was something different in the air that Easter, a mix of restrained joy and smoldering fear, of silent celebration and palpable tension. We all felt it, even if no one dared say it out loud. Juice had set up a small table in the center of the basement, just a plank supported by boxes, but for us it was the most sacred altar in the world. On it we placed the bread I had brought, wrapped in a clean cloth, and the bottle of grape juice. There was also a worn Bible, its pages yellowed and corners bent from constant use. It had survived 3 bombing raids on different houses. It was a miracle in itself. Rania lit 2 more candles and placed them on the sides of the table. Her daughter Nadia, just 6 years old, clung to her mother's skirt, watching with wide eyes. The girl didn't quite understand why we were hiding, but she had already learned to keep quiet. Children of war mature too quickly. They lose their innocence before they even lose their teeth. Fuad touched my shoulder and handed me a crumpled piece of paper. "I found this psalm this morning," he said quietly. "I think you should read it tonight." I unfolded the paper. It was Psalm 91. "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." I nodded slowly. I looked around. Everyone was sitting on makeshift benches or on the floor, forming a semicircle around the table. Old Layla kept her hands clasped in her lap, her lips moving in silent prayer. Tariq, the young man, still wore that restless look, as if expecting someone to come down the stairs at any moment. Samir had taken off his shoes to massage his aching feet, but he never took his eyes off the wooden cross. The heat was almost unbearable. Some fanned themselves with whatever they held, sweat glistening on their faces lit by the candles. The basement had no ventilation, and with so many people breathing in such a small space, the air became thick, almost solid in the lungs. But no one complained. No one suggested leaving. We all knew that moment was precious. Every second together a gift that could be our last. I stood up. Silence fell immediately. All that could be heard was the flickering of candles and in the distance the constant murmur of the city under curfew. "Brothers and sisters," I began, keeping my voice low, almost a whisper. "We are here tonight because we believe in the resurrection. We believe that the grave could not contain our Lord. And if He conquered death, then we too can conquer fear." I saw heads bow, some murmuring Amen, almost voicelessly. I continued, "I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I don't know if we'll still be here next week or next month. But I do know that tonight, in this dark, damp place, God is with us because where 2 or 3 gather in His name, He has promised to be present." I read the entire Psalm 91. Each verse seemed to weigh more heavily than the last. "You will not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor of the destruction that wastes at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. When I finished, the silence that fell was deep but not empty. It was filled with something invisible, almost tangible, hovering between us, breathing with us. Someone coughed softly, a candle sputtered. A dog barked in the distance, alone, in the Syrian night. I broke the bread slowly. The crackling sound of the crust seemed louder in the cramped space. I held it up for everyone to see. "This is his body, broken for us," he said, and I began distributing the pieces, hand to hand. Layla wiped away a tear before lifting the bread to her mouth. Fuad closed his eyes tightly, as if holding back a sea of emotions. Rania kissed Nadia's forehead before handing her her piece. There was a quiet beauty in that simplicity. We had no fancy suits or grand ceremonies. There were no imposing buildings, professional music, or marble altars. We had only faith each other, and that shared bread, reminding us that we were not alone. And there we were, in a dark, damp basement, with splintered wooden pews and candles dripping wax on the floor, testifying that the true church does not depend on walls, but on hearts united in God. Yet I'd never felt so close to God as I did in that moment. I poured the grape juice into small plastic cups we'd procured. They weren't silver chalices or fancy goblets, but in that moment they were the most sacred thing we had. I passed between the rows, filling each cup carefully, without spilling a drop. Every drop was precious. When everyone had theirs, I held up mine. "This is his blood shed for the forgiveness of sins. Let us drink it together," remembering that he paid the price we could not afford. We drank at the same time. The silence was almost deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, felt the presence of each person in that space, as if we were connected by something invisible but real. Then he began to sing. It wasn't planned. He simply opened his mouth, and the words came out softly but firmly. "Wonderful grace of the Lord, that you saved me, a sinner." One by one, the voices joined in. We sang in whispers, but the intensity made up for the lack of volume. It was as if we were silently shouting, declaring our faith in the midst of danger. I closed my eyes as I sang. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I forgot the war, the fear, the rubble, and the scars of the city. There was only that moment, that communion, that encounter with the eternal amidst the storm. Layla's voice rose, trembling but firm. Samir gently tapped his hand on the floor, keeping time. Some knew all the words, others only the melody, but everyone felt the music pulsing in their hearts. I remembered the Sundays before the war, when more than 200 people would gather, instruments would play, and we would sing at the top of our lungs without fear. Those days seemed like another life, another world. And yet there, in that damp, dark basement with only 24 people and no instruments but our hoarse voices, I felt God closer than ever. Maybe because when we lose everything, we finally understand that He is all we need. I opened my eyes and looked at the faces around me. Each carried their own story of grief. Layla had lost her husband. Fuad had watched his business burn to the ground. Rania had fled her hometown with only what she could carry. Samir had a permanent limp, a reminder of an explosion that had nearly taken his life. And yet there they were, singing, resisting, believing. It was as we reached the last verse of the anthem that I heard the first sound, a high-pitched whistle in the sky, distant at first but quickly approaching. I opened my eyes. Tarek was already on his feet, staring at the ceiling with an expression of pure terror. Some remained frozen, glasses still in their hands. Others looked around in confusion, wondering if they had actually heard what they thought they had. The singing ceased. The last words died on our lips. The whistling grew louder, closer. There was no doubt now. We had heard it before. We knew exactly what it meant. Layla whispered something I couldn't understand, but it sounded like a desperate prayer. Rania instinctively covered Nadia with her body, as all mothers would do when danger approached. Jusf looked up at the concrete ceiling that separated us from the sky, and I, still clutching the cup, could only think one thing before the world exploded. "Lord, if this is the end, let it be in your presence." The hiss turned into a roar, and then everything fell apart. The world exploded in an instant that seemed to last an eternity. First, there was the sound, a crash so violent it stopped being a noise and became a physical pressure, something that hit me from the inside of my chest. The air was knocked from my lungs in one fell swoop. My ears stopped working, replaced by a high-pitched buzzing that seemed to come from the center of my head. Then came the shock. The ground shifted as if the earth itself had decided to swallow us. I fell. I don't remember falling. I simply lost my footing. The glass I was holding flew from my hand. I watched in slow motion as the grape juice dispersed into the air, forming tiny red droplets that floated for a moment before crashing to the ground. The candles all went out at once. The darkness was instantaneous and total. Then everything began to give way. The ceiling creaked with a horrible sound as if thousands of bones were breaking simultaneously. I heard screams, but they seemed distant, muffled by the ringing in my ears. Something heavy slammed into my back and threw me face down onto the dirt floor. Dust rushed in like an invisible wave, filling my nose, my mouth, my eyes. I tried to breathe, but all I could manage was coughing. Each attempt to inhale brought up more dust, more pulverized debris. It was like trying to breathe sand. The taste was bitter, metallic, mixed with crumbling plaster and concrete. The darkness was so dense it felt solid. I tried to move, but something held me down. Something heavy pressed against my back and legs. I wiggled my fingers. They worked. I wiggled my toes. They responded too. I was still in one piece, at least for now. Dust continued to fall, settling in my hair, on my neck, in every fold of my clothes. I coughed again, so hard I felt like something inside me was going to break. The sound of my own cough echoed strangely in that space I no longer recognized. Amidst the chaos, my mind began to process fragments of reality. It was a projectile. It hit the building, probably the roof. We were buried. Perhaps there was no way out. What about the others? Suddenly, where are the others? I tried to scream, but all that came out was a hoarse, weak sound. Can anyone hear me? Silence. Just the sound of rubble settling. Small chunks of concrete falling here and there, dust continuing to fill the air. It was a painful silence, a silence that could mean the worst. Then I heard a low moan, barely audible, but it was there. Hello? I shouted louder. Who's there? It was Fuad's voice, broken, frightened. Elias, I can't move. There's something on my legs, something heavy. The relief of knowing some were still alive was mixed with the terror of not knowing how many had been lost. Hang in there, brother, I whispered, even though I had no idea how I could truly help him. We'll get through this. Then slowly voices began to emerge from the darkness. First one, then another, until they became many. Screams, cries, broken pleas. Some words of desperation, others of faith. It was a chorus of fear and hope intertwined, as if the ground itself were testing us. Rania screamed her daughter's name and my heart sank. Nadia, Nadia, answer me. The panic in her voice pierced the darkness and made me hold my breath. Then a small breath of life, the little girl's voice. Mom, I'm scared. I'm going, my love, I'm going. Stay where you are, Rania replied through tears and sobs. It was that cry of relief mixed with terror that only a mother knows. For an instant, the whole world seemed to be reduced to that reunion of voices. I tried to move, at first barely, but then with effort I pushed with my arms, feeling the weight on my back give way. It was a beam. Splinters of wood scraped against my skin, the pain sharp and cutting, but I couldn't stop. I had to reach the others, one effort after another, using my legs and arms as leverage, until the beam gave way enough for me to roll to the side. I lay on my back, gasping, feeling my heart pound like a drum in the complete darkness. My hands groped around, encountering concrete, dust, wood chips. Then something soft, the cloth that had wrapped the bread. I clutched it like a thread of reality, a reminder that we were still alive. I sat up slowly, pains flaring throughout my body, bruises forming invisibly, but I could move, and that was what mattered. How many are injured? I asked the darkness. I need to know who needs help. The answers came in whispers and moans. I'm fine. I think my arm is crushed. I can't find Yusuf. I need water. The cross. The cross. Can anyone see the cross? My mental inventory ran quickly. Fuad was trapped but conscious. Rania and Nadia were alive. An injured arm. Yusuf? No answer. Worry gripped my chest like an invisible hand. Yusuf, our brother, the owner of the house, who had so often sheltered and protected us, now lay silent beneath the rubble. I knocked. I called. Can you hear me, Yusuf? Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice dancing off the invisible walls. My heart raced, adrenaline mixing with fear. We were trapped. We didn't know what was happening outside, if someone would come for us, if the ceiling would hold for another second. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a weight pressing in on all sides, trying to bend us over. I felt the walls closing in, and for a moment my mind almost gave out. But then I remembered. They needed me. I couldn't allow myself to panic. I closed my eyes, though in the pitch black it made no difference, and tried to pray. The words wouldn't come, but I felt God was there, breathing with me, steady as ever. A thread of faith, small and tenuous, but still burning, keeping us anchored in life amidst the chaos. All I could think was, God help us, please help us. Then a strange sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't falling rocks or groans. It was a slow, steady creak, as if something enormous was moving above us. A building in agony. My heart raced. Don't move, I whispered, breathless. Everyone, please stay still. The creaking continued, long, eternal. Each second seemed to last a lifetime as we waited for everything to fall apart. Between the muffled sighs and groans, I heard someone quietly praying the Lord's Prayer, pausing only to catch their breath. The silence that followed was almost palpable, tense, heavy. My mind raced. My children in other cities, my family waiting for me, entire lives depending on us. And there I was, helpless, trying to control my breathing, trying to believe we would still be alive. A verse I had read minutes before came to mind. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but nothing will come near you. Was it a promise or just a pretty phrase for times of peace? Doubt pierced me like a blade. If God was with us, why were we buried under tons of rubble? An inner voice reminded me, faith isn't about never being in danger. Faith is about never being alone. That thought gave me strength. Maybe it came from my grandmother, who always said things like that. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit speaking, even when we don't want to hear. Maybe it was just desperation seeking a spark of light. I tried to get up but hit my head on a beam. The ceiling had dropped too low. I would need to move carefully, crouching down. I crawled toward Fuad's voice, feeling the texture of the rubble with my hands. Chunks of concrete, broken wood, fragments of pews, everything destroyed. I touched something soft, damp pages torn from a Bible, and held on tight, a reminder that we were still alive. Fuad, keep talking so I can find you. I'm here, not far away. His voice sounded weak, almost choked. Elias, I can't feel my feet. The fear in his voice made me accelerate, but each movement stirred up more dust, and small pieces of debris fell. One misstep could trigger another collapse. I'm almost there, brother. Hold on tight, I whispered. Even though I didn't know the true distance, other voices began to emerge. Tariq helping someone, Samir moving through the darkness asking who needed help, and old Layla praying loudly, reciting psalms from memory. Each sound gave me hope that there was still a chance, that we were still together. And then something changed everything. A voice came from above, from the world outside. Is anyone down there? I froze. Was it real or was my mind playing a cruel trick? Absolute silence. We all held our breath. The voice returned more firmly. Can you hear me? Are there any survivors? My throat closed, unable to utter a sound. But Tariq, the young man who had been so nervous all night, shouted with all his remaining strength, Yes, we're here. There are people trapped. In that moment, buried under tons of rubble, in the most complete darkness I had ever known, I felt something I hadn't felt since it all began. Hope. Small, fragile, but real, like a candle lit in the darkest night. The silence that followed Tariq's scream was no longer the silence of terror, but of anxious anticipation. We all waited, tense, praying for the voice to speak again, that it wasn't just an illusion. Seconds that felt like hours passed until we heard again, Hang on, we're going to get them out of there. A mixed sound came from us, crying, laughing, praying all at once. Rania hugged Nadia tightly and the girl moaned. Someone began to sob uncontrollably. I just closed my eyes and let the tears run down my dust-covered face. We weren't alone. Someone knew we were there. Someone would come for us. But reality hit quickly. Above us, footsteps, voices, and the constant creak of moving debris. Each noise threatened to collapse the unstable ceiling. Be careful, I whispered, even though I knew they couldn't hear me. If you move the wrong thing, everything will collapse. Tariq replied from the depths of the darkness. There are 24 of us. There are injured. Some are trapped. Understood, the voice from above replied. Don't move. We'll work quickly, but you must be patient. Patience. An almost impossible word at that moment. Every second beneath it all was torture. The air, heavy and filled with dust, made breathing difficult. The heat was stifling, and the constant fear of a final collapse pressed down on us. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus on what I could control. I kept crawling toward Fuad. Finally, my hands touched his shoulder. Brother, I'm here, he said. His voice was shaking. Elias, I can't feel anything from the waist down. Something big fell on me. I think it's part of a wall. I lowered my hands to feel the weight. Indeed, there was something huge on his legs. I pushed, tried to move, but it wouldn't budge an inch. It was too heavy. I would need help, a lot of help. Let's get him out of here. The first thing is to free him. You'll be fine. I didn't know if it was true. Didn't know if his legs were broken or just numb. But I needed to give him hope. I kept moving among the others, checking on everyone I could reach. Samir had a bleeding cut on his forehead, but he was conscious. Elderly Laila sat against what remained of a wall, breathing heavily, but apparently unharmed. Rania and Nadia were hugging each other, trembling but unharmed. I took a deep breath and kept searching. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3. How many had I found? Someone was still missing. Yusuf. I knocked again. Please, Yusuf, silence. I followed him to where I remembered him being when the grenade fell. My hands groped among the debris, wood, and twisted metal until I felt something warm. A hand. Yusuf's hand. I gripped it tightly. Can you hear me? A faint moan. He was alive. Hang in there, brother. Hang in there. I repeated these words over and over as I tried to find a way to free him. Heavy beams lay above him, intertwined with other debris. Any wrong move could make matters worse. God, I whispered, I need your help. I can't do this alone. Then something impossible happened. A faint light began to penetrate the darkness. It wasn't electric nor a candle. It was the light of the outside world filtering through an opening created by the rescuers. A tiny thread of light, but enough to illuminate Yusuf. For the first time I could see him, pale with blood on his face, but his eyes open. Eyes that conveyed pain and something else, something it took me a moment to recognize. Peace. Elias, we sang until the end, right? He whispered hoarsely. My throat closed up. Yes, brother, we sang until the end. It was worth it. A small smile appeared on his chapped lips. Now, with the light revealing what I was doing, I continued working to free him. Others arrived to help. Tariq first, then Samir, limping but steady. Together, we carefully removed each piece of debris with the help of the rescuers. The hole grew larger, the light seeping in deeper and deeper, and with it the fresh air. I had never appreciated a simple breeze so much. Little by little, I began to see everyone's faces. Covered in dust and tear stains, we looked like ghosts, but they were living ghosts, counting again. 1, 2, 3, 23, 24. Everyone was there, all fighting back, some injured, some trapped, but alive. 24 people in a basement that had taken a direct hit, under tons of rubble, and not a single one lost. It was impossible. Statistically absurd. I'd seen destroyed buildings, I'd seen the damage bombs cause, but this shouldn't have ended like this. I looked at that slowly growing ray of light and understood something I couldn't prove, but knew to be true. We weren't alone in that darkness. Layla began to pray aloud. Shaky but firm, her voice filled the space. Thank you, Lord, that even as we walked through the dark valley, we feared no evil, for you were with us. Others joined in, and so did I. We prayed and cried together. They weren't tears of sadness, but of something much deeper. It was the tears that arise when you realize you've witnessed something greater than yourself. A face appeared in the hole above. A man wearing a helmet and reflective vest. Everyone's safe down there. We're all alive, I replied. And as I said it out loud, the enormity of the truth hit me again. We were all still here. The man disappeared for a moment, then returned. Let's lower a rope. We need to rescue the injured and the children first. The process was slow. They tied Nadia up and pulled her up, while Rania shouted instructions and words of encouragement. The girl cried, frightened by the height, the rope, and everything she had been through. But when she finally reached the top, we heard applause. Then it was the others' turn. Each person who emerged was greeted with applause from those waiting above. Applause mixed with tears. Some rescuers shook their heads in disbelief. When we finally freed Joseph and lifted him up, while Fuad was carried on a makeshift stretcher, one by one we emerged from that hole into the fading light. What we saw left us speechless. The building was destroyed. Where once there had been a 3-story structure, now only smoking rubble remained. The walls had completely collapsed. The ceiling was gone. It was as if a giant fist had crushed everything from above. But the basement somehow had held strong enough. People in the street crowded around, staring in amazement. Some wept, others just watched in silence, as if trying to comprehend the impossible. There were onlookers, neighbors, people who ran when they heard the explosion. When the last of us left, when the 24 of us were out in the open, covered in dust but breathing, something unexpected happened. Someone started singing. I think it was Rania, or maybe Layla, the hymn we had sung before the impact returned to our lips. Amazing grace of the Lord, who saved me, a sinner. We sang there amid the rubble, our voices hoarse from the dust, our bodies aching, tears streaming freely. People watched us, some confused, others reverently. An older man took off his hat and pressed it to his chest. A woman crossed herself. They knew what the destruction meant and couldn't explain how we were still standing. Neither did we. We only knew we were. And in that moment, standing atop the rubble of what had been our shelter, I understood something. Sometimes miracles aren't spectacular. They don't come with fireworks or signs. They don't require applause. Sometimes they're silent. Sometimes they simply mean keeping breathing, keeping alive, when all odds say you shouldn't try again. Night fell over the tachyon in a heavy silence. Paramedics examined us by the light of flashlights and makeshift lanterns. Fuad was rushed to the nearest hospital that was still functioning. Yusuf was too, though he insisted he didn't need it. Sami received stitches in his forehead. Others were bandaged, given splints, and treated for cuts and bruises. But no one had lost their life. No one suffered injuries that couldn't be healed. And there, under the night sky and the silence of the rubble, the certainty became clear. We had survived. All of us. Against all odds. The doctors shook their heads as they examined us. One of them, an older man with a grey beard, looked at me. She looked me in the eyes and said, I've been working in emergency services for 30 years. I've seen all kinds of accidents and attacks. This isn't normal. You should be in black bags, not here singing hymns. I didn't know what to say. I just thanked her and sat on a piece of fallen wall, trying to process everything that had happened. A little while later, she came running back. Someone had warned her. She saw me covered in dust and dried blood and fainted. I held her as she cried against my chest, repeating my name, as if needing confirmation that I was there, that it wasn't a dream. I thought I'd lost you, Soyaba. I heard the explosion and knew it was near where they were gathering. I'm here, I whispered. I'm here because God isn't finished with me yet. We stood like that, arm in arm atop the rubble, while chaos continued around us. There were military vehicles, ambulances, people running back and forth. The smell of gunpowder and destruction filled the air. Sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with voices shouting instructions. But the 24 of us in that basement gathered together once more that night. We didn't plan it. We just reached for each other like magnets, as if something invisible was drawing us together. We sat in a circle on the street a few meters from where we had met. No one spoke at first. We just stared at each other, still unable to believe we were all there. It was Layla who broke the silence. I saw it, she said, her voice firm. When everything fell apart, when I thought it was the end for me, I saw something. It wasn't a bright light or anything spectacular. It was more like a presence, as if someone had laid hands on me and covered me. Others nodded. Rania spoke. I fell on top of Nadia trying to protect her, but debris fell everywhere. I closed my eyes waiting for the impact, and nothing touched us. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around us. Tariq, the young man who had screamed for help, had tears in his eyes. I've been afraid all my life, he confessed. Afraid of war, afraid of losing my family, afraid of believing in God because I thought it would make me more vulnerable. But down there in the darkness, he learned something we all feel. Faith doesn't make you invincible. It makes you unbreakable. And they're not the same thing. Samir spoke about Psalm 91, which we had read, and how each verse became real that night. God's promises don't always mean we won't face danger, but they do mean we won't face it alone. We talked for hours, sharing what each of us had experienced in that darkness. Some prayed nonstop, others thought about their families. Many admitted to doubting, feeling terror, questioning everything they believed, and we all agreed on one thing. We hadn't gotten out of there alone, but practical reality began to set in. Youth no longer had a home. The building was in ruins. We could never meet there again. And with the conflict intensifying, it was too dangerous to remain together as a group. The decision was made that very night, amid tears and hugs that seemed endless. We had to split up. Some families left for Tartu, a coastal city to the south where they had relatives. Others headed for smaller towns inland, hoping to find some safe haven. Some would try to cross the border into Turkey, if they could find the means. I decided to head for the mountains. There was a small village called Slimfa in the Ansarila Mountains. A brother who had managed to escape months earlier told me about this place. He said there was still peace there, that Christian families lived discreetly, far from danger. And there was someone who could take me in. I didn't want to be separated, nor did my children. But we all knew that staying in the Takia was no longer an option. We survived the attack, and it became clear to everyone. People talked about the miracle in the basement. Some came looking for us, interested in our faith, but others looked at us with suspicion, even hatred. And in times of war, being seen as a threat is the same as becoming a target. So we prepared our farewells for the next morning. It was safer to travel at night when the streets were empty and the checkpoints were less strict. On my last night at home, I couldn't sleep a wink. I sat on the small balcony, looking out at the street, the city that had been my home for over 6 decades. The lights were dim, the curfew in effect. Every now and then a patrol car would pass, and muffled explosions echoed in the distance. She sat beside me and held my hand. "Are you coming back?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But if God pulled me out of that rubble, it's because He still has a purpose for me. And in that I trust." She rested her head on my shoulder. Then together we trusted. At dawn, with a small backpack containing the essentials, some clothes, my Bible, and a photo of my family, I set off for the mountains. I walked for hours, first through the streets of the Akia, then along back roads, and finally along trails that climbed into the hills. The sun rose behind me, casting my long shadow over the dusty road. I thought of the people who had gone in other directions, Rania and Nadia heading for Tartu, Fuad recovering in the hospital and planning to leave as soon as he could walk, Layla heading for a monastery in the north where she had a niece, Tariq heading for the Turkish border. Everyone dispersed. The congregation that had withstood years of war was fragmented by a single explosion. Perhaps you too feel scattered, far from community, far from the place where you used to feel God's presence. But I want to remind you of something essential. Faith doesn't need a building or a perfect location to flourish. Sometimes God scatters us not to destroy us, but to plant us in new soil. Where has He placed you now? What seed of hope can you sow where you are? As I walked, I remembered my grandmother's words spoken to me when I was a child. The church is not a building. The church is us, the people who believe. And as long as there are people who believe, the church remains alive. The road was hard, the heat of the day increasing as I climbed. I stopped several times to rest and drink water from the small streams I found along the way. But with every step, I felt that God was with me, guiding my feet, sustaining my heart. I passed abandoned villages, houses with wide open doors and everything inside covered in dust. The war had touched every corner of Syria, leaving silence and destruction in its wake. At one of these stops, I sat under the shade of a tree and opened my Bible. I was looking for something, I didn't know exactly what. The pages fell to Acts chapter 8. I read about how persecution had scattered the church in Jerusalem, and yet the gospel reached new places. Those who had been scattered carried the word everywhere. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Perhaps our dispersion was not the end, but the beginning of something new. I arrived in Slimfa on the third day. The village perched on a mountainside with stone houses that seemed to grow from the rock itself. The air was fresh and pure, and the sound of water rushing through the ravines gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The contact my friend had given me was a man named Bashir. At first, he greeted me with suspicion, but when I told him everything that had happened, his eyes changed. "I've heard of you," he said. The story had reached them. 24 people who survived a destroyed building. Some called it propaganda, others, a miracle. "I only know what I experienced," I replied. He then offered me a simple room at the back of his house, from which I could see the valley, and on clear days even the Mediterranean in the distance. I began to live quietly. I worked on the farm, repaired roofs, did whatever was necessary. But I also shared my story, quietly, with anyone who would listen. I didn't preach in town squares or organize large gatherings. I just lived. And when someone asked me how I could find peace amidst the chaos, why I didn't carry fear like everyone else, I would tell them about that Easter night in the basement. 24 people risking everything to worship, a roof that collapsed but didn't crush us, a darkness that couldn't extinguish the light we carried within. Months passed. I received news of some of my brothers. Rania and Nadia were safe in Tartu. Fuad had recovered and was with his family. Tariq managed to cross into Turkey. Others disappeared, and all I could do was pray for them. One afternoon, while working in Bashir's fields, a young man approached. His eyes were tired, his clothes dirty from the road. "Is that you?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Why?" he asked. "Because I need to hear that God is still there. I've lost everything, my family, my home, my faith. I need to know there's still reason to believe." I sat with him under the same tree and told him my story. I didn't try to embellish anything or make it more dramatic than it was. I talked about the fear, the doubts, the feeling that it was all over. But I also talked about the voice we felt from above, about the 24 who survived, about the silent miracle that none of us could explain. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, absorbing every word, every sigh of hope that still remained. "And now?" he finally asked, his eyes full of expectation. "I'm sharing this because maybe someone needs to hear this," I replied. "Even when everything falls apart, we're not alone. If this story has reached you, perhaps it's no coincidence. Maybe your own ceiling is caving in. Maybe you're in your own darkness, wondering if there's someone up there who sees you, who hears you. I want you to know, there is. The same presence that sustained us in that basement can sustain you too." I explained that miracles aren't always announced with big signs or loud bangs. Sometimes they're silent. The simple act of continuing to breathe, even when everything tells us we shouldn't. I'm still here in this mountain town, living and sharing my faith quietly. I no longer have a congregation of hundreds, nor a building with pews and a pulpit, but I have something far more valuable, a story stronger than any explosion, more enduring than any wall, a story that proves that God remains faithful even when the world around us crumbles. And this is what I've learned, that His presence never abandons us, even in the darkest moments. In the silence of the night, I pray, "Lord, teach us to trust even when everything around us falls apart. Remind us that your presence is more real than any fear we may feel." Amen.